This isn't just a music story. This is a story of survival, power, and one of the greatest comebacks in history. Before the fame, before the Grammys, and before the world called her the Queen of Rock and Roll, Tina Turner was just Anime Bulock, a girl from Nutbush, Tennessee, who had no idea she was about to live through hell and come out the other side, a legend. And before the controversy, there was Ike Turner, a man already shaping the sound of rock and roll. Together, they built something explosive. On stage, they were unstoppable. But behind the music was a story far more complicated than the world ever saw. In 1993, What's Love Got to Do With It hit theaters and shocked audiences worldwide. The film grossed over $60 million and earned Academy Award nominations for Angela Bassett and Lawrence Fishburne for their portrayals as Ike and Tina Turner. But what if the real story was even more complicated? What if some of the most shocking scenes were toned down and others reshaped for Hollywood? Health Wealth Diary presents the real story from What's Love Got to Do With It. Anime Bulock was born on November 26, 1939, in a place called Nutbush, Tennessee, a small rural farming community where life was hard and dreams were even harder. Nutbush wasn't just small, it was segregated. This was the Jim Crow South, a world defined by limits. Limits on where you could go, where you could work, what you could become. And for a young black girl growing up in that environment, the odds were already stacked against her. Her parents, Floyd and Zelma Bulock, were sharecroppers. That meant long days in the fields, low pay, and constant struggle. Their relationship was unstable, marked by tension, arguments, and emotional distance. And inside that home, young Anime was watching everything. Then one day, her mother left. No goodbye, no closure. Just gone. Her father followed soon after. And just like that, Anime learned a lesson that would shape her entire life. People leave. She was sent to live with her grandmother, Georgiana, a strong, religious woman who had become one of the few stable forces in her life. While attending Sunday church service, something began to form. Her voice. Not as a career, not as a dream, but as an escape, she sang in the choir, not knowing that one day, that same voice would carry her across the world. Anime's childhood wasn't peaceful. Even in her grandmother's care, there was always something missing, a sense of abandonment that never fully left. And when her grandmother passed away, that fragile sense of stability was gone. She was forced to move again, this time to St. Louis, Missouri, to reunite with the same mother who had left her years before, but something had changed inside her. She wasn't the same little girl anymore. She had learned how to adapt, how to survive, how to keep going, even when everything around her was falling apart. Before Tina Turner became a star, before the fame, the chaos, the violence, there was a man who had already built a name for himself, a man who understood music better than almost anyone else in his time. His name was Ike Turner. Ike Turner was born in Clarksdale, Mississippi, a place deeply rooted in blues history, but also in hardship, poverty, and violence. As a child, Ike witnessed something no child should ever see. His father, beaten nearly to death, after a violent altercation over a woman. Ike found something early, something that gave him power. Music, not just listening to it, but understanding it, breaking it down, rebuilding it. He wasn't just a performer, he was a creator. By the early 1950s, Ike Turner was already ahead of his time. His band, the Kings of Rhythm, was raw, energetic, and different. Some historians credit his work on Rocket 88 as one of the first rock and roll records ever made. That's important, because before the world knew Elvis, before rock exploded globally, Ike Turner was already shaping the sound. But with talent came something else: control. Ike wasn't just a band leader, he was a perfectionist. Every note had to be right, every performance had to be tight. Mistakes weren't tolerated, and over time that perfectionism turned into something more intense, more rigid, and more controlling. In What's Love Got to Do With It, Lawrence Fishburne portrays Ike Turner as explosive, volatile, and dangerous. And yes, that side of Ike existed. But here's what the film only touches on briefly. Ike wasn't just a villain, he was a musical architect. a man who helped shape early rock and roll, a man who understood rhythm in a way few others did. Even Fishburne himself said the original script felt one-sided, too simple, too focused on making Ike just the bad guy without explaining why. Fishburne reportedly turned down the role numerous times. It wasn't until he found out that Angela Bassett took on the role of Tina Turner that he decided to play the part of Ike. St. Louis, Missouri in the late 1950s was alive with music. The city pulsed with rhythm and blues, jazz, and late-night performances in smoke-filled clubs where raw talent either broke through or disappeared completely. It was in this environment that a teenage girl named Anime Bulock found herself night after night, standing in the crowd, watching closely. On stage was a man who already commanded attention, Ike Turner. His reputation as a band leader was growing, and his presence in the club scene was undeniable. For Anime, watching Ike wasn't just entertainment, it was education. She studied how he moved, how he directed the band, how the audience responded. She wasn't just dreaming of being there, she was preparing for it. The film presents their meeting as an almost instant transformation. In that version, Anime grabs a microphone, sings, and immediately changes her life in one defining moment. But the reality was less instantaneous and more driven by persistence. She didn't just stumble into opportunity, she forced her way into it. She kept showing up, kept watching, and when the moment finally appeared, she didn't hesitate. One night, a microphone was left open. There was no formal invitation, no introduction, no safety net. Anime stepped forward and took it. What followed wasn't polished or refined, but it was powerful. Her voice carried something raw, emotion, energy, and a presence that couldn't be ignored. It cut through the noise of the room and shifted the atmosphere instantly, and in that moment, Ike Turner noticed. But what he saw wasn't just talent. Ike saw potential, something he could shape, mold, and develop. That distinction is important because from the very beginning, this wasn't a balanced dynamic. On the surface, it looked like mentorship. Ike began working with her, guiding her, introducing her to the structure of the music industry. He pushed her to perform better, to sing stronger, to move with more intensity, and she responded. She adapted quickly, proving that she could meet his expectations. As their professional relationship developed, it began to blur into something more personal. The film presents this transition as natural, almost inevitable. But reality was far more complicated. Ike already had relationships, including a live-in partner, and his personal life was far from stable. Still, Anime became more deeply involved in his world, stepping into a space that was already layered with tension and unresolved dynamics. Then came the breakthrough moment that would change everything. A recording session for a song called A Fool in Love was scheduled, but when the original singer failed to show up, Anime stepped in. What was meant to be a temporary solution became something much bigger. Her performance gave the song a unique energy, and when it was released, it became a hit. That success changed her role completely. She was no longer just part of the background. She had become the focal point. Then came one of the most significant decisions of her early career. Ike gave Anime a new name, Tina Turner. On the surface, it seemed like a standard stage name, something designed to elevate her image. But behind that decision was a calculated move. Ike trademarked the name, meaning it legally belonged to him. If she left, he could replace her with someone else and continue using the name Tina Turner. From the outside, everything looked like the beginning of something incredible. A rising star, a powerful duo, and a future filled with success. The performances were electrifying, the music was gaining attention, and the momentum was undeniable. But beneath that surface, something else was developing. Something far less visible, but far more dangerous. Control was becoming central, dependency was deepening, and as their fame continued to grow, so did the tension. What began as opportunity was slowly turning into something else entirely. The world was about to meet Ike and Tina Turner, not just as performers, but as a force. And behind that force was a reality far more complex than anything the stage could show. They killed it, night after night, city after city. Backed by the kings of rhythm and the Ikettes, their shows became legendary. Audiences didn't just watch, they felt it. Tina's voice cut through venues with power and emotion, while her physical performance, fast, sharp, almost athletic, set a new standard for live music. It was raw, alive, and unpredictable. And that unpredictability became part of the appeal. The film captures this rise with speed and energy, showing the duo quickly climbing the ranks of the music industry. But in reality, the success was built through relentless work, endless touring, long nights, minimal rest. This wasn't overnight fame. It was earned through pressure, repetition, and constant demand for perfection. And that pressure came directly from Ike. As a band leader, Ike was uncompromising. Every performance had to meet his standard. Every note, every step, every movement was controlled. He rehearsed the group intensely, pushing them to deliver the same level of energy every single night, regardless of exhaustion or conditions. For Tina, this meant operating at full capacity at all times. There was no room for weakness, no tolerance for mistakes. The stage became both her platform and her obligation. As their popularity grew, so did the scale of their opportunities. They began recording more hits, gaining national recognition, and eventually crossing over into mainstream audiences. Songs like Proud Mary would later become defining records, elevating them from an R&B act to an international phenomenon. They even toured with major acts like the Rolling Stones, exposing Tina to larger audiences and proving that her energy could command even the biggest stages. For Ike, control was everything. And as Tina's star began to rise independently of him, that control felt threatened. The more attention she received, the more unstable the balance became. Success, which should have strengthened their partnership, instead began to expose its cracks. At the same time, Ike's personal struggles were intensifying. The pressures of the industry, combined with his need for control, led him deeper into substance abuse. Cocaine became a significant factor, amplifying his volatility and unpredictability. The film shows this progression, but like many aspects of the story, it compresses the timeline. In reality, this decline was gradual, but its impact was profound. For Tina, this created a dual existence. On stage, she was powerful, confident, and unstoppable. Off stage, she was navigating a reality that was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. The contrast between those two worlds couldn't have been sharper. One was built on applause and admiration, the other on control and tension. The turning point wasn't a single moment. It was a series of small escalations, a raised voice becoming a pattern, a moment of aggression becoming more frequent, a sense of control becoming absolute. Meanwhile, the public image remained strong. The performances continued. The music kept coming. To the world, Ike and Tina Turner were one of the most exciting acts in music. But behind that image, the reality was becoming harder to contain. The film frames this period as the beginning of the abuse, highlighting specific incidents to mark the shift. But in reality, the line between control and abuse wasn't always clear at the start. It blurred over time, making it more difficult to define and even harder to escape. By the mid-1960s and into the early 1970s, the Ike and Tina Turner review had reached its peak. They were no longer just rising stars. They were established, respected, and widely recognized. From the outside, nothing seemed out of place. The performances were still explosive, the crowds were still growing, and the music continued to succeed. In reality, the abuse wasn't always explosive. It was often unpredictable. Moments of tension could escalate without warning, and that unpredictability created a constant state of anxiety. For Tina, this meant never fully knowing what might trigger the next outburst. That uncertainty became part of her daily life, shaping how she spoke, how she acted, and even how she performed. The film includes several scenes that have become iconic. One of the most well-known is the Eat the Cake scene, where Ike publicly humiliates Tina. While this moment is based on a real incident, it was amplified for dramatic effect. In reality, the humiliation was more subtle, but no less significant. It reflected a deeper pattern, one where control extended into even the smallest, most personal moments. One of the most misunderstood aspects of this period is the question people often ask: why didn't she leave sooner? The film presents moments where escape seems possible, where the path appears clear. But in reality, it wasn't that simple. Leaving meant walking away from everything: her career, her financial stability, and her identity as Tina Turner. It meant starting over without support, in an industry that had already begun to define her through her association with Ike. During this time, Tina experienced moments of deep despair. One of the most significant was her suicide attempt, which the film places in the 1970s. In reality, it occurred earlier in 1968. And yet, even within that environment, something began to change. Tina was introduced to Buddhism, specifically the practice of chanting. For Tina, this practice became a source of inner strength, a way to reclaim a sense of control that had been taken from her. On the surface, nothing appeared different. The Ike and Tina Turner review was still performing. The shows were still happening. The image remained intact. But beneath that image, the relationship had become increasingly toxic. And the moment that would finally break that cycle didn't come in a quiet, controlled setting. It came in motion, on the road, in transit between performances. The film portrays this moment as explosive and immediate. A violent altercation inside a limousine on the way to a hotel in Dallas, followed by Tina making a sudden decision to run. And while the specifics are dramatized, the essence of that moment is one of the most accurate parts of the entire film. That night, after years of control, Tina made a choice. She decided to leave Ike. She crossed a freeway, disoriented, and with almost nothing. According to her own account, she had just 36 cents in her pocket. Eventually, she made her way to a nearby Ramada Inn. The staff, recognizing her, allowed her to stay despite her lack of money. That moment was the most critical turning point in her life. When Tina filed for divorce from Ike Turner, she was up against more than just a person. She was up against a system that had been built around his control. Contracts, finances, rights, all of it was structured in a way that left her with very little leverage. Instead of fighting for money, property, or assets, Tina made a different choice. She walked away from almost everything. The only thing she asked to keep was her name, Tina Turner. That decision is one of the most powerful moments in her entire story, because the name that had once been a symbol of control, something Ike had created and legally owned, had now become something else entirely. It was her identity, her future, and her chance to rebuild. At this point, she wasn't the global icon people recognize today. She was a woman in her late 30s with limited financial resources, a complicated reputation, and an industry that wasn't exactly waiting for her return. In many ways, the odds were even more stacked against her now than they had been at the beginning. But something fundamental had changed. For the first time in years, the control was gone. Financially, Tina Turner was nearly starting from zero. The decision to walk away from the divorce with almost nothing meant that she no longer had access to the wealth or infrastructure that had supported the Ike and Tina Turner review. There were no guaranteed bookings, no major label backing, and no clear path forward. For an artist who had spent years performing at the highest level, this shift was drastic. And then there was the industry itself. By the late 1970s, the music world had changed. Styles were evolving. New artists were emerging. And for many in the industry, Tina Turner wasn't seen as a solo act. She was seen as part of a past duo. There was doubt about whether she could succeed on her own. Age also became a factor. In an industry that often prioritizes youth, a woman in her late 30s trying to rebuild her career faced an uphill battle. So she did what she had to do. She worked. Another factor was her willingness to adapt. The Tina Turner of the 1960s and early 70s had been defined by R&B and soul. But as the industry changed, so did she. She began to explore different sounds, different styles, and different ways of presenting herself. Still, progress was slow, but something was building, not visibly, not dramatically, but steadily. In 1983, Tina Turner recorded a cover of Al Green's Let's Stay Together. At the time, it wasn't positioned as a career-defining release. It was simply another opportunity, one of many she had taken during her rebuilding phase. But something about this version connected. It gained traction and began to generate a level of attention she hadn't seen in years. It wasn't explosive, but it was momentum. That shift became fully visible with the release of her album, Private Dancer, in 1984. Often described as her breakthrough solo project, the film implies it was her first album. In reality, it wasn't. It was her fifth. But what made Private Dancer different was how it positioned her, not as a continuation of her past, but as a modern, standalone artist. Her sound was different, it was cleaner, and more aligned with the pop and rock landscape of the 1980s. And at the center of it was a song that would redefine everything. What's Love Got to Do with It? When the track was first presented, Tina reportedly didn't even like it. It didn't fit the style she had built her career on. But what seemed unfamiliar at first became the key to her reinvention. The song climbed the charts and eventually reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, her first and only time achieving that position as a solo artist. Private Dancer became a global success, producing multiple hit singles including Better Be Good to Me and the title track, Private Dancer. The album sold millions of copies and earned critical acclaim, including Grammy Awards. It wasn't just a comeback, it was domination. Her live performances became massive events. Tours sold out across continents. One of the most defining moments came in 1988, when she performed in front of approximately 180,000 people in Rio de Janeiro, setting a Guinness World Record for the largest paying audience for a solo artist at the time. That moment alone symbolized how far she had come, from running across a freeway with almost nothing to commanding one of the largest crowds in music history. Another key factor in this transformation was management. Roger Davies, who became her manager during this period, played a crucial role in reshaping her career. He understood how to position her in a way that aligned with the changing industry, helping her transition into a more rock-oriented international superstar. The film includes his character, but like many elements, simplifies his impact. In reality, his role was instrumental in turning momentum into sustained success. In the years immediately after the breakup, Ike Turner attempted to continue performing and recording, but the momentum wasn't the same. Without Tina as the focal point of the act, audiences responded differently. The energy, the chemistry, and the draw that had once defined their performances were no longer there. And as the industry continued to evolve, Ike found himself increasingly out of step with the changing landscape. At the same time, his struggles with substance abuse deepened. Cocaine, which had already begun to affect his behavior during the later years of the duo, became an even more significant factor. It impacted not only his personal life, but also his ability to maintain consistency in his career. Legal issues followed, including arrests and periods of incarceration related to drug charges. These events further damaged his reputation and limited his opportunities. Public perception also shifted dramatically. As Tina's story became more widely known, particularly after the release of her autobiography, I, Tina, and later the film adaptation, Ike's image became increasingly defined by the allegations of abuse. In interviews and in his own autobiography, Ike disputed some of these claims while acknowledging others. He admitted to violence, particularly in the context of his drug use, but strongly denied certain depictions, especially those presented in the film.
I've slapped Tina. The only time I ever punched Tina in my life was the last fight that we had. And that was in Dallas, Texas. This is the last time.
This created a complicated narrative. On one hand, he was recognized as a pioneering figure in the development of rock and roll. On the other, his personal life and behavior overshadowed much of that legacy. The film, while powerful, reinforced a version of his story that emphasized one side of that complexity. And for many viewers, that became the defining image. Despite this, Ike's musical contributions did not go entirely unrecognized. In 1991, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as part of Ike and Tina Turner. However, he did not attend the ceremony, reportedly due to legal issues at the time. This later period of his life also included moments of reflection. In interviews, Ike spoke more openly about his past, acknowledging mistakes and the impact of his actions. While these statements did not erase the past, they added another layer to the narrative, one that the film does not explore. Ike Turner passed away in 2007 at the age of 76. His death marked the end of a life that had been both influential and deeply controversial. The official cause was reported as a cocaine overdose, with contributing factors including other health conditions. Understanding what happened to Ike Turner after the breakup doesn't change the events that came before, but it does complete the picture. It shows how two people who once shared the same stage ended up on entirely different paths. One rising to global icon status, the other struggling with the consequences of his choices. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Tina had already accomplished more than most artists could in multiple lifetimes. Massive tours, global hits, film appearances, and a level of recognition that placed her among the greatest performers of all time. But unlike many artists who continue chasing the spotlight, Tina made a different choice. She began to prioritize something she had spent most of her life without: peace. In 2009, after the highly successful Tina 50th Anniversary Tour, she officially retired from live performance. And perhaps the most symbolic part of this new chapter was where she chose to live. Tina Turner settled in Switzerland, far from the chaos and pressure that had once defined her career. In 2013, she officially became a Swiss citizen, a move that reflected not just a change in location, but a transformation in identity. In 2013, she faced serious health issues, including a stroke, intestinal cancer, and kidney failure. At one point, her condition became so severe that she required a kidney transplant. In a profound act of support, her husband, Erwin Bach, donated one of his kidneys. An act that reflected the kind of partnership and stability that had been absent in her earlier life. On May 24, 2023, Tina Turner passed away at the age of 83 in her home in Switzerland. The news resonated across the world, not just because a music icon had died, but because of what her life represented. Tributes came from across the industry, artists, actors, fans, and public figures, each acknowledging not just her music, but her story. Because Tina Turner wasn't just known for her voice or her performances, she was known for what she overcame, and that's what makes her legacy different. When What's Love Got to Do With It premiered in 1993, it didn't just tell a story, it defined one. For millions of people around the world, this film became their introduction to the lives of Ike and Tina Turner. It was powerful, emotional, and unflinching in its portrayal of abuse and survival. Critically, it was a success. Commercially, it was a success, grossing over $60 million on a $15 million budget. And at the center of it all were two performances that carried the film to another level. Angela Bassett didn't just play Tina Turner, she embodied her. The physicality, the voice, the movement, the intensity. Every detail was studied and rebuilt from the ground up. Her performance earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress and a Golden Globe win. And to this day, it's still considered one of the most powerful portrayals in a music biopic. Even Tina herself, despite her issues with the film, praised Bassett for capturing her spirit rather than simply imitating her. Opposite her, Lawrence Fishburne delivered a portrayal of Ike Turner that was intense, layered, and deeply unsettling. His performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, and many critics credited him as one of the key reasons the film felt so impactful. He didn't just play a villain, he portrayed a man whose behavior was destructive, controlling, and at times terrifying. What's Love Got to Do With It gave us a story, but the truth was bigger. Because the lives of Ike and Tina Turner weren't just defined by what happened between them, but by what happened after. Together, they built something explosive, a sound, a stage presence, a legacy that changed music. But when it fell apart, everything changed. One walked away with nothing and rebuilt into something greater than ever imagined. The other, a pioneer in his own right, saw his legacy reshaped by the weight of his actions. The film shows the conflict, but the real story is the contrast. Two people, one history, and two completely different endings. And in the end, that's what makes this story unforgettable. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite scene from the movie, and why? If you enjoyed this video, give us a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more cool videos from The Health Wealth Diary.